The next story I want to turn to is of course a story that is pretty much consuming America's media time, and that has to do with the death of the apparent death of Jeffrey Epstein in the while in custody in New York City and awaiting trial for his charges that were brought against him from federal prosecutors in New York about basically paying girls as young as 14 to have sex with him in his Upper East Side home and his estate in Florida. The reason I wanted to talk about this case, I always, if you watch my show all the time, you know that my show, I don't want to talk about, lurid cases. I don't have any interest in the kind of, going for headlines that are really, that don't bear on preserving and saving America. I'm not into the sensationalist stuff. I don't ever do it. I haven't even covered Jeffrey Epstein much in the show. But this now, what has happened in New York and what America does about it profoundly, deeply, importantly affects America's future. I'm going to tell you why I say that. Jeffrey Epstein was in custody. He had been under, and to back up with him, he'd been in custody because he was charged criminally with with having sex with minors. In addition, he's well known over the many, many years in America for having access to a private island, having apparently arranged for many minors, young girls, to be available at the island. Many famous people having allegedly visited the island, had illegal, inappropriate relations with young girls. I mean, the guy was not a stellar figure, and he was known for this for a long time. And many famous people apparently were caught up in this use of his private jet and flying down to this island and having relations with young girls, girls who were not of age. So he's got a lot of enemies, and he's got who would not have wanted him to tell about their involvement in his life, his conduct. And he also has a lot of mystery surrounding him. And I want to get to that mystery for a minute when I go back to make my point about why this matters to America. The mystery surrounding him, among many things, is this. He settled out in a case a few years ago, similar charges in Florida. And in that case, there was and they recited in the settlement of that case what his net worth was. And he just said, at least 9 figures, or more than 9 figures, which puts him in the category of billionaire. But one of the many mysteries surrounding Jeffrey Epstein is, where in the world did he get all of his money? Because there's no record, as there would be normally for someone who made their money, whether they inherited it, whether they made it by some fabulously successful startup business, whether they made it because whatever reason, investment strategy, whatever it is, there was never any explanation for where Jeffrey Epstein got all his money. This makes, of course, people very nervous and speculating on all sorts of crazy things about him. And we don't know what was true or not. But in the Florida case in which he reached a settlement, the actual words by the U.S. attorney involved in arranging that settlement by Acosta were the words he had been told. He explained that back in the day, this is back in 2007, when Alexander Acosta, who was the labor secretary until last week and who was at the time the U.S. attorney prosecuting Epstein in Florida, Acosta said he was told to lay off the case because I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. So Acosta is saying that someone told him, you can't go prosecuting this guy Epstein. He's somehow related to intelligence. Didn't say American intelligence. Many speculative theories about Israeli intelligence. Maybe he was an operator from Mossad. Maybe he had some connections to American intelligence. He certainly was a man capable of blackmailing dozens of people. This is one of the concerns about him. He's very capable of blackmailing people because they had gone to Epstein Island with him. They had engaged in this ongoing, prurient, inappropriate involvement with with minor girls. But the reason the story matters to you, I mean, I don't want to talk about this. I mean, I don't like what he did. I want justice for the girls who were his victims. And I want there are pending civil lawsuits that he can go forward against his estate. I want them to get some kind of justice if that can be accomplished. And the justice by that, by the way, understanding what a completely creepy guy he was, Epstein did not have young girls joining him on his jet and on his island who were, the product of lovely homes and caring parents and good families who were taking care of their kids. He preyed on the vulnerable. He preyed on people, young girls lost, struggling, whether they were homeless or not, I don't know, but they were just struggling. People who were easy for him to prey on. He was truly a nasty man. But why all this story matters to America is this. He was in custody. There had been a suicide watch, which was removed. They decided he's not really a suicide threat. He apparently had told many guards, I'm not suicidal. I'm worried about someone killing me. And so he'd made those statements as being reported. And he had, after the suicide watch, the common procedure in this jail, once you're no longer in suicide watches, they put another roommate in your cell with you so that it's less likely you'll commit suicide with somebody else right there who can stop you or notify people. Didn't get a roommate, apparently no cameras were operating, which is very unusual, not good, not common. So didn't have cameras operating, didn't have a roommate, taken off suicide watch, and then the whole, supposedly committed suicide. And the reason, now getting around to why I want to tell you why this matters to you in America so much. The people who stood to be harmed by him releasing the names of people who were involved in all of his nefarious, grotesque conduct is a long list of very powerful people. A lot of people would have liked to see him dead. A lot of people would have gone to a great length to see him dead. So there is an investigation now. Attorney General Barr is looking into it. He's actually appointed both an investigator and said he's asked the Inspector General to look into it, which means Attorney General Barr, is a little tiny bit worried about the FBI and how thoroughly they will look into this, because he's also turning to the Inspector General, who's not part of the FBI. Inspector General are freestanding, independent inspectors. So he's having two sets of people look into it. But the reason it matters so much is this: the idea that somebody who has the ability to blackmail, to ruin the lives of many, many prominent people, who dies under what seem to be somewhat mysterious conditions in a jail cell, who's apparently hung himself after telling people he wasn't suicidal, he didn't want to kill himself, he was worried about being killed. These really they get to the core of our trust or lack thereof in our federal government, the core of whether we trust our government to tell us the truth, compounded with where we still are with the whole, Trump, Russia collusion, Mueller, the actual, or the term I use for that entire episode now is just, it was the effort of the FBI and the Department of Justice to commit a coup to take down the candidate and then the president of the United States. They had tried to frame President Trump. They had set up people to try to frame President Trump. These are very serious things that went on inside the FBI and the DOJ. We still don't have those answers. We have people looking, reports are coming, and Attorney General is looking into it, but we don't have answers yet. America's trust in the FBI and the Department of Justice was deeply, deeply shaken by the Mueller investigation, by the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. And it will be even more shaken if we don't get really clear answers about whether Epstein really committed suicide. Did someone manage to kill him, get him killed in prison, make it look like suicide? Who are the people whose names would be released? I know some names were put out. There are apparently more names coming out of people who were involved. Who was involved in all of this and leading to Epstein's death? And it even leads, because people have so little trust in the Department of Justice and the FBI, it has led some people to argue, well, maybe Epstein's not even dead. Maybe he arranged to have it appear as though he died and somebody else wheeled out and he's off in protection somewhere or in some other way been pushed away from the legal challenges he faces. I am not positing that I think that is true. I don't know. But I do know this episode does impact one of the most important aspects or elements of America, and that is the American people need to have trust in the rule of law, that there's no ruling elite class above the rest of us who can just pull strings and get somebody freed or get somebody killed in prison, that people who should be held accountable for their conduct are held accountable, and that we don't have a system that will cover up and hide whatever was really happening inside that Manhattan Correctional Center cell, whatever was really happening. This is the mystery of Jeffrey Epstein's death. It really goes to the core of our trust in the federal government, the core of our trust in the idea of whether or not we get truth out of the government or we don't get truth because they don't want to have us know what it is. And so there's a real need for Attorney General Barr to step up and do the actual thorough, serious investigation and report to make the American people feel like they actually got a straight story. And that is it for today on Jeffrey Epstein. But I'm going to guess, my friends, it won't be the last of Jeffrey Epstein.